guy who companies call when things go wrong.
In the incident response world or part is not about testifying as an expert in court. It's about helping a victim through a cyber event. An incident response is really what it sounds like. It's preparing for, but detecting, containing, recovering from a cyber incident.
How does a typical investigation look like today versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
One of the interesting things about, frankly, any aspect of computer science, any aspect of cybersecurity technology, is it evolves. Look, if you had asked me the same question 5 years ago, I wouldn't be talking about AI. It's not about preventing the event or the incident. It's not about stopping the intrusion. You can make the castle walls 1,000 feet high. You're not going to keep every attack out. You're going to have a vulnerability. You're going to have a supply chain risk. You're going to have an insider threat. What we need to do better about as a security community is putting controls and processes in place to surface the anomalies to make us better at containing and preventing the blast radius of damage, right? We may see that. We may see it sooner rather than later. I'm not seeing it at scale yet from...
Welcome back to the Full Metal Packet. Today we're breaking down how modern attacks actually play out in the real world, from quiet identity takeovers to fully weaponized exploits and everything defenders usually miss until the damage is done. Our guest today is the guy who companies call when things go wrong. Devon Ackerman is the global head of digital forensics and incident response at Cyber-Reason. Before this, he was the FBI Supervisory Special Agent, focused on counterintelligence, cyber investigations, and also the driving force behind the DFIR Definitive Compendium Project. That's a new word I learned today, by the way. And he's also the author of a book, Diving In, an Incident Responder's Journey. Devon, you sit at the exact point where theory ends and oh shit begins. Welcome to the show. How are you doing on this fine day today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Approximately where are you joining us from, if that's not secret?
I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada, here for a conference based on cybersecurity. So very appropriate that we're having this recording and interview today.
Yeah. Oh, no way. We could have done this in person. What's the conference about? I'm actually not even aware of any conferences that are happening.
Yeah, it's a cybersecurity focused conference that blends in experts from the insurance market, from panel and non-panel law firms that help represent clients going through incidents and bad days, but also vendors like myself that deal in both proactive and reactive consulting services to help clients improve their security.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like something that we should be attending, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get you some info.
Yeah, let us know how it goes. But I guess, let's kind of like dive in. So this acronym DFIR. Before it used to be two separate concepts. Now they're kind of merged into one thing. Why is that? Why is that even a thing these days? Like, why is it all treated as a singular scope, I suppose?
Great question. So digital forensics and incident response. Some vendors, some companies separate them out. I treat them as a cohesive tie-in to each other because you cannot conduct incident response, responding to an incident, without digital forensics principles. There's a concept or a phrase we call digital forensics science because digital forensics is a branch of forensic sciences which governs the processes relating to how we acquire data, verify the data, analyze the information or the data, and then present those findings, typically with an end goal of a court of law, right? Regardless of jurisdiction. Now, much of what we do in consulting in the incident response world or part is not about testifying as an expert in court. It's about helping a victim through a cyber event. So digital forensics, if that's the branch of forensic science, it deals with how we grab the data, how we verify and authenticate the data, how we analyze the data. Then incident response is really what it sounds like. It's preparing for, but detecting, containing, recovering from a cyber incident. Lawyers can be incident responders. People that work for cyber insurance companies can be incident responders. It's It's about adding value in the response to an incident. But the DF part, the digital forensics part, is about how we do this in an articulable and defensible way. It's one thing to look at a log and say, well, in the log, I think this thing happened. It's another based on training, education, and experience to say, actually, the tool that was used creates this artifact in the log, which allows us to reach the following conclusion. So that's digital forensics, that's incident response, and it's really in lockstep to allow us to arrive at an end defensible story of how something happened, why did it happen, when did it happen, and then really what data is at risk. That's DFIR.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I guess how does a typical investigation look like, today versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago? I mean, this is a fast-moving area, and I'm sure it's changing quite a bit. Can you maybe walk us through the major differences?
That's a great question. So one of the interesting things about, frankly, any aspect of computer science, any aspect of cybersecurity and technology is it evolves. Look, if you had asked me this same question 5 years ago, I wouldn't be talking about AI, at least not as much as everyone else is in our sphere right now. So I think one of the biggest things that has changed in the last several years has been the speed at which threat actors, adversaries, those that are looking to intrude or steal from victims, the speed at which they move, the speed at which they identify a vulnerability and then action that vulnerability, which is usually one of the more common ways they get into networks or cloud environments. So speed is absolutely an aspect. Implementation of AI, whether generative or not, the fact that it is a tool enabler. It is so much quicker now, instead of a group of hackers, individuals getting together and researching a problem, you give it to a software application, which does the research for you, finds the vulnerability for you, and then presents you a path to leverage that vulnerability. So I think speed and AI-enabled attacks is absolutely something we have seen shift very much in the last 5 years. The last one I'll give you, we, in a positive way, have seen the endorsement, the embracement of good cyber technology practices like EDR, endpoint detection and response technology, something that helps monitor an endpoint and look for maliciousness. We have seen clients and victims embrace multi-factor authentication, something that allows you to protect beyond just a username and password. But we've also seen threat actors abuse even those technologies. So we've seen the public do better. We've seen private sector do better in the engagement or embracement of better technology securities. We have seen threat actors pivot and overcome those.
Mm-hmm. On a subject of speed specifically, do you think like attackers are starting to move faster than defenders in some sense, or not?
Ooh, fun question. So that is not an easy yes, no, or one answer fits all. There's some complexity to the answer I'm going to give you, which really comes down to the sophistication of the internal information security group, the IT group, also the type of blue team that you have. Not every small, medium business has an on-call, on-staff, full DFIR team. But in your enterprise clients, your Fortune 1000, your Fortune 500 clients, they have whole teams, whole staff for that. And so depending on the scenario, yes, we actually have seen instances where along the path of an intrusion, right, we can talk about that today, in the 5 or so phases of that path, the threat actor sometimes comes to your front door and they figure out how to crack the lock on your front door. But the more sophisticated businesses, the blue teams, to your question, might catch them as they're coming through the door, versus another company where maybe they don't catch them until they almost get to the bedroom where the jewels are, right? Again, to borrow from the analogy. And sometimes, unfortunately, they don't catch them until they've already left, right? So it's not necessarily a complicated answer. It really comes down to the tools, the training, and the level of sophistication of the blue team and how and with the real estate that they're trying to protect.
Mm-hmm. All right. Alex, you've been awfully quiet. I think you have some things to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely want to dive into those 5 phases that you mentioned. But before that, you kind of mentioned something, right? So like how to respond and do the digital forensics. I think I'm wondering how much of this, in terms of moving faster than attackers, is implementing forensics as not of a reactive measure, but as a proactive thing. So, like, I think a lot of people, including myself for a long time, treated digital forensics as a reactive thing, right? So, like, yeah, you have some things in place to be able to look at data, and then when something happens, you go and look and figure out what was going on, right? What systems, what accounts, what data was accessed. But how should we think about digital forensics if we want to move, like, be faster than attackers in terms of being proactive with digital forensics?
I love the questions. These are great questions, guys. So what I would say about kind of the first part of your question is that digital forensics will continue to remain a reactive support or reactive investigative mechanism, because that is the nature of the scientific discipline. And you typically aren't leveraging digital forensics until something has happened that you need to investigate. Now, that doesn't mean that the threat actor has gotten all the way through the path of intrusion or all the way through to an end goal. It might mean they started through the intrusion and you were able to contain them because you identified them. Back to your earlier question, right? The fact that a blue team may be responding quicker because they have tools that enable them to find an anomaly and contain that threat. But you're still leveraging digital forensics to investigate up to the point that you contained them. So kind of back to your question, I think something that's interesting here is, from a forensics perspective, we often do things called tabletop exercises or incident response planning. It's not necessarily about having the tools pre-deployed. You can. It's not necessarily about having the tools at the fingertips of the blue team. It's about leveraging the right process once you've identified an incident has occurred or an event, right? Some things are events and they don't become incidents until a certain threshold is reached. But the forensics, the tools themselves are usually reactive in nature. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Right. So you see, it is mostly reactive, but I guess with some automation, and if you have those tools, you can kind of try to hunt for threats, I guess, ahead of time. But you're still going to need to use, DF to respond.
Yes, exactly. It's still not whack-a-mole. That's the wrong analogy. It is still a back and forth game, right? And look, threat actors are always looking to see how they can beat or be better than a blue team, right? If we kind of boil this down to red teams and blue teams, the threat actor doesn't want to get caught. They want to achieve their end goal. So they're always going to be looking for that way to circumnavigate the blue team's toolkit. And we're going to talk a little more about that today, I'm sure.
Well, actually, just on a subject, if we're gonna, we're kind of going to the future here, which I wanted to leave for later, but ultimately, if we're gonna assume that most of the quote-unquote red teams going forward into the future, and the further into the future we go, the more, the closer it will be to 100%, are going to be automated in some shape or form, whether these are autonomous agents, fine-tuned models, tuned for exploitation, even or tricked cloud models with guardrails removed or whatever. For the blue teams to be leveraging the exact same tools, doesn't it kind of like even the playing field, where you no longer need those massive headcounts that only massive companies can actually afford? And a single individual can make a massive difference if they are in fact using the same tools as the attackers are going to be using and are using.
It's interesting, right? It's almost like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? The possibility that you could be leveraging sophisticated technologies, but on both sides. And then it almost becomes a war of the bots. Look, we absolutely could reach that point at some point in the future. We're not there yet. We do see AI and elements of artificial intelligence, generative AI, being integrated into products and platforms. I have yet to see a singular solution that bridges that gap completely. But look, there's also lots of academic articles. There's even things in the news, as of even most recently today, about organizations that have put a lot of research into automating attacks and automating defense. We're not there yet as a culture, a society, or even a cybersecurity community. We will probably get there in the next 5 to 10 years. But look, there's always still, even after hundreds or thousands of years of crime and breaking into houses, there's still an element, though, of the person doing the actual attack. And I do think that will still be with us for a bit. There is still knowledge. There is still something that cannot replace the human mind, human ingenuity. And there is certainly a balance also between common sense and common tactics. So I do think AI will be an enabler. I don't think it'll be a complete replacement for some time.
Hmm. Okay. Well, how do you feel about, like, I'm sure you've read Anthropic's latest release just a couple of days ago with their Mythos model and the alleged capabilities that it has in the hands of completely non-technical staff. That's at least according to what they put out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it was able to find vulnerabilities and, Debian stuff that's been in production for like literally decades and had hundreds of thousands of eyes on it, and it was able to discover vulnerabilities while those tools were being wielded by a non-techie person.
Yeah.
And that's allegedly a thing that exists right now. And the timelines that you've mentioned, 5 to 10 years, like honestly, I think like in 10 years, it's impossible to predict what the internet will even look like, to be honest. But like, how certain are you about these like kind of arguably far away timelines, given that there's demonstrated capabilities, if you believe the marketing of Anthropic
Yeah.
right now?
I think I'd answer that like this. We, as a security community, started recommending MFA or two-factor authentication a decade ago. We still run into clients, we still run into environments that are single-factor authentication. It still happens. Does that mean it hasn't largely been embraced? No. Does that mean, though, that's completely been erased as a attack vector? No. So I look at that from a history standpoint. Now, at the end of the day, there is a ramp to many of these things. There's also the history and the embracement of the age bracket, right? So every single generation embraces technology different. I see this in the students that I'm hiring out of college intern programs that are becoming the future, me one day. Every generation adapts technology differently. That's why I think the 5 to 10 year model might be embraceable from a broad scale. But to your point, and your point is well taken, are we still going to have pockets of technologies, pockets of research that explode much faster forward? Yes. Do I think, though, that it'll be at scale from a global embracement standpoint for, overnight? No. I think we still have some time on that, for good and for bad.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess like there hasn't been a time where, everybody on the internet gets nukes at the same time. That has not occurred before. So I don't know. It's sometimes history does repeats itself. People like to say that a lot, but I think there are exceptions to that rule, and we might be at a precipice of that particular exception.
We absolutely could.
Only time will tell.
We all could be very busy very soon. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into, I guess, another question I have. Cyber Reason published this predictions. I think you have the 2026 incident response predictions. I think it was called Identity and Beyond. And there's like a few predictions. Obviously, the first one would be that identity is the primary attack surface. So I'd love to kind of dive into that, and maybe we can talk about maybe give a little bit of I guess devil's advocate pushback on some of it. It claims that there's threat actors will continue to deprioritize malware in favor of abusing identity systems, cloud access, and trusted applications. And while I totally agree with that, that's going to be on the rise 100%. I'd love to hear you kind of tell us why you and the Cyber Reason think this, and maybe give a little bit of a few counterpoints and pushback on what else might be driving some of that.
Yeah, no, I love the Q&A. So let's dive in on this. So I think what your question is around, identity and identity-based attacks, leveraging or replacing, supplanting, if you will, the maliciousness of 10 years ago. Look, when I first got into cybersecurity, and I'm sure many of the guests on your show will give kind of the look back of when I got into, but 20 years ago when I started, viruses were a real thing. And every type of incident that had an intrusion, if you will, was on kind of a singular endpoint, a singular desktop, some person's computer, and was a virus they downloaded. That was what we call malware, malicious software. And then over the last 10, 15 years, viruses have turned into Trojans, have evolved into malware, have evolved into what we call polymorphic malware. It's levels of advancement, right? Because security software got better, so threat actors got better. What threat actors have now learned, and what we have seen, is that pendulum has swung again. The embracement of technology that protects the endpoint. look, whether it's AI enabled security software or it is software that is looked to be almost act like a black box flight recorder, what more traditionally we call endpoint detection response technologies. And look, trust me, there are flavors thereof, even with things like XDR, extended detection and response. Regardless, it's a security blanket for the system you're on right now, like I'm on with my laptop. And the goal of that is to have a baseline and to detect anomalies against that baseline. This is red team versus blue team basics. What does the threat actor not want to do? Create an anomaly in the baseline. So, Nat, to the kind of point you opened up with, if I can assume or steal the identity of Devon, and I can become him logging onto the system, logging onto the cloud platform, I'm now not a anomalous ID login, which would immediately cause an event or an alert. I am Devon. So now what's my second hurdle? Not to create a ripple effect in the baseline of what Devon normally does. So if I don't introduce a piece of malware or third-party software that is an anomaly to the enterprise ecosystem, I can hide in the noise. And so what we have seen threat actors do is identify a path to obtain or impersonate a legitimate user. And if you'll allow me, I'll give you a quick war story. Had a recent engagement in which a threat actor had called a call center for a target, for a victim, impersonated a member of their information technology team, their IT, and said, look, I got a new laptop. My username and password's not working. I'm trying to log in. Interestingly enough, they had tried to log in through the VPN, which created multiple fails. And the third-party call center validated that. Yes, we see you trying to log in. We see this is a device we've not seen in your account. Yes, I just got a new laptop. I need you. Can you reset my password for me? Oh, well, we need to validate. Can you confirm I believe it was like a date of birth, some type of personally identifiable information? Well, I think we would all agree. Unfortunately, a lot of our PII is already out there, our personally identifiable information. And they were able to provide that. So they provided the date of birth. They validated the person on the phone was who they thought they were talking to, and they reset the password. The hilariousness of the follow-on was, oh, actually, this is a brand new device. I don't have MFA set up. Can you temporarily disable the MFA? I'll re-enable it once I get in. Yes, that's very normal. We, of course, would expect that. Microsoft Authenticator or Duo, whatever it is, we disabled it for you. And now what happened? Now you have a threat actor who has impersonated a legitimate identity. They've logged in. They have access. The second thing they did was they looked for installed software. What was their tool already installed in the enterprise? A remote access software that the IT teams legitimately used. And they just used that. So they maintained and stayed in the baseline. So back to your question, to kind of wrap this up. We see threat actors embracing identity-based attacks because it allows them to hide in the noise. And we see threat actors having moved away from noisy malware because they don't want to be caught quickly. They want to hide in the noise, maintain the path of intrusion, and reach their end goal and not get caught.
I think that makes a lot of sense. My pushback originally when I read that article was going to be now that there are tools like Mythos and other ones, and there's open weight models as well that allow you to exploit vulnerabilities at scale, even if you don't have the full skills, or if you want to do it, if you're North Korea and you have a team of 1,000 people sitting there, you can find a lot of stuff with these models. So
I totally agree.
Enabler. So with that on the rise, I would have thought that they would still prioritize the traditional, breaching and maybe not malware, but like exploiting vulnerabilities at scale. But what you just described was missing kind of from the article, which is, yes, they're going to deprioritize it because of they want to stay in the system longer. They want to be undetected longer. I think that's a valid point to it. So that's really good, I guess, nuance to that prediction.
Well,
in that prediction, sorry, go ahead.
And if I could just add one thing to the vulnerability piece, I do think we're going to see in the scenario just provided the discovery and the more rapid exploitation of vulnerabilities. And to be very honest, whether AI enabled or not, we're already seeing that. I'll give you one quick brief war story for you. So there was a recent vulnerability in a very popular internet-facing technology that we won't mention vendor names. The vendor produces the software to allow for remote management of systems across the internet. So it's very popular with managed service providers, managed security service providers. They use this software, they use this platform, but by nature, it's internet-facing. There was a recent vulnerability. A CVE was identified It was published, let's just say, approximately 30 days ago. 29 days ago, a actual proof of concept set of code was released that allowed for the exploitation of that. We were engaged, as most life cycles are, vulnerabilities identified, threat actors start exploiting. Usually in a week to 2 weeks after, sometimes later, you start getting the calls as an incident responder. In that timeline, it was 30 days ago, it was the CVE, 29 days ago, we saw the scripts, 29 days ago is when the threat actor had started against our victim. So I think that's a good real life example. Whether AI enabled or not, we do see threat actors moving very, very quickly to identify a vulnerability and action it before the victim's patch. And that's the last piece I want to leave you with us in this war story. The client actually tried to do everything right. They got the security bulletin. They immediately prioritized the patch. They patched by that afternoon within 24 hours, an amazing quick patch window. Threat actor had exploited within 12 hours, which had resulted in a web shell, which gave them backdoor access. So I think that's a good real world example to your point.
Yeah, that's.
I think like also like that time frame will shrink to ultimately single digit minutes. In fact, that's entirely possible right now. You know, there's many CVE feeds out there. As soon as something goes live, you can have an agent on it, a liberated agent running on your own GPU, crafting attack code in single digit minutes, and then going on Shodan, for example, finding a bunch of targets and just unleashing it in literally single digit minutes. And that's feasible right now. And like ultimately, what do defenders do in a world like this, except for literally monitoring the same feeds in an automated fashion and crafting patches in real time and hoping to plug the holes, because if they don't, they're going to get owned potentially 4 minutes later. And I think we're approaching that kind of reality, if we're not there yet already.
There's risk in that automation as well. I just want to point out that if you do something like that, and you have your own good blue team bots reading CVEs, currently they're still susceptible to prompt injection. You can probably create an attack on the CVE list itself to create all sorts of havoc and chaos. So like this is going to get pretty gnarly pretty fast once a lot of this automation is in place.
I'm curious about all the extra internet traffic that this is going to be caused. This is an amazing. We were worried about bots, 5 years ago with ad tracking technologies and everything else. Now you're talking about all of these AI processes you gentlemen are talking about on today's show, potentially running through and scanning, all fighting and vying for bandwidth. We're going to start overwhelming servers at some point that aren't built for this type of traffic. But I digress.
I don't think like the bandwidth, I would say it's probably not the main issue. It's just the compute to run all of this. And to Alex's point, I'm really curious when we're going to see a fake CVE where the CVE is the exploit itself.
Maybe
that is read by all these bots, and it's like, oh shit, that looks really serious. And the attack code, quote unquote, is just it is like a fancy prompt injection for the good guys to execute on their own safe hardware.
You may have just given them some ideas.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a version of the supply chain attack, right? Imagine you say, look, there's a CVE for OpenSSL, and if you've already compromised OpenSSL, you claim to have patched something in it where you actually introduced malware. They all rush to patch it to the latest version, which actually introduced the malware. Right? So there's all sorts of angles here.
Very much.
Yeah. So maybe going a little bit down that rabbit hole a little bit. So you mentioned like what do we do about these things? I think you mentioned this on your previous shows and podcasts you've done, that phishing resistant MFA is super important. So for those that don't know, I mean, phishing resistant MFA to me, and maybe there's other types that you can go and tell us about, but like hardware keys, right? So things like YubiKey, things that you don't just know, it's not some piece of information, but it's a physical thing that you have access to, whether that's a hardware key or a secure device, that no matter what passwords or things that are compromised, you need some human or some physical thing to press a button to let you into a system.
Yes.
In the I guess, prediction report, we're talking about phishing-resistant MFA bypass attempts using adversary-in-the-middle techniques. Can we talk a little bit about that? I'd be really curious to know more about what types of phishing-resistant bypass techniques are being exploited these days, and what can we do about them?
No, great question, great segue. So, look, email is the most ubiquitous platform that we all have access to, and not just one email account. We probably all have access to multiple email accounts and multiple email platforms. So it is absolutely going to continue to remain an attack vector that is highly sought after, highly targeted, highly exploited. And even when we introduce a new type of security technique or concept, threat actors are going to try to figure out a way to overcome or circumvent that technology. And we've seen that with the adoption of multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, regardless of which one or which acronym you like. The fact that something else as a secondary method or means validates you as a user beyond just the username and password, right? That kind of security concept. And to the points you just went through, hardware keys or YubiKeys and other types of fingerprinting of the device that says, okay, you've passed the first phase of username and password. Then we check something on your device, whether it's software or hardware, the physical USB dongle, whatever it is, something else to check to make sure you are who you say you are and you're coming from a device we have pre-authenticated or pre-approved. The totality of that handshake process is important. And the more that companies do to embrace and endorse and properly implement, the more we see the attacks against those be successful. Actually, let me say that the less we see those be successful. Where we still see BECs or business email compromises be successful is where they've enabled MFA, but it's not phishing resistant MFA. And most of your authenticator apps out there, whether Duo, Microsoft, etc., other third parties, they have a phishing resistant version where the app that you have, the app that you have on your phone is the ID or as the code, and that is the way that it generates, which means you have to put it into the screen or the prompt. It's not perfect. You still have social engineering. I still have worked investigations in which, even though the MFA says no one will ever ask you for this code, please do not do it anywhere else, people will still be conned into providing that over a Teams call or a phone call because they've been duped. They've been socially engineering to believe that the person they're talking to is legitimate, which then what? You can put all the sophisticated technology in place and you still potentially have a human, the butt-in-seat analogy, I would say, that is the vulnerability. So one of the things about BECs that's interesting is the fact that threat actors have identified, look, you're going to give username and password, you're going to give an MFA prompt, you're going to pass something back and forth. And really the goal of that is to say, hey, server, hey, thing, hey, platform, I am who I am, and I control the MFA. But what have threat actors done? They've come up with these things called phishing kits. And the phishing kits really, conceptually, exist to man-in-the-middle style attack. Meaning that if I am talking to one of you gentlemen and I need to pass you something securely, someone else stands in the middle of us and says, hey, give that to me. I'll hand that note on to the other person that you're talking to. But usually it's invisible. Usually it is transparent. We don't know that the man-in-the-middle attack is happening. There may be signs of it to a more technical audience or technical member, but the whole goal of the phishing kit is to represent itself as the real system you're logging into, intercept that approval process, and allow the threat actor to use it. And it's still very successful. I don't want to misquote the stats in our TTP briefing that you may be referring to, but I believe it is a significant percentage of the business email compromises that we investigate that do have MFA are also having compromises to that due to these techniques we're talking through today.
Would you say like the quote unquote if MFA is in place, kind of like the break in the chain is getting that MFA data phished, or some kind of social engineering attack where that layer is stripped away, as an example that you provided earlier, which I think that was like a casino-related example from just a few years ago, because that story sounded very familiar from public disclosure. Like which one is it, or is it both?
It's not normally the stripping away of the layer, if I'm hearing your question correctly, right? Because the MFA still exists. It's how do I intercept as a threat actor the MFA approval response, what we call an authentication token, right? So you have your username and your password, the thing that I know, and then you have something that the system, the platform, the server responds with saying, yes, you've passed the approval. I think you are who you say you are. The threat actor's goal is to intercept that token. And so the goal of these phish kits is to run in the middle to grab that. It's not about circumventing MFA. It's about overcoming that security measure and walking away with the authentication capability.
But isn't it like ultimately? Well, obviously, it depends on the company and the security training of the people at the AIT desk. But it seems that almost it's just simpler just to call the IT desk, like, hey, I'm Joe Bob. I lost my token, or my phone doesn't work anymore. Can you just remove the 2FA? I need to log in right now. I'll set it up later. And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. That seems like almost easier than setting up this kind of phishing chain and trying to capture this token at the exact time. And it's also only live for like 30 or 60 seconds. So you have to do this very quickly.
So phishing kits can be very inexpensive, but let me give it to you like this. You and I may be in the same city and we may follow the same streets to get to the destination, the restaurant we're going to. We may take two very different paths of getting there. That's exactly how threat actors operate. So both of your scenarios you provided are absolutely tools in the proverbial toolbox. They're paths to get to the end goal, but threat actors do different playbooks. And so while one may do the social engineering to call a call center to do a social engineering type attack verbally, another may decide a $200 investment in a phishing kit and a server infrastructure to send out 1 million spam emails with a 1% success rate is worth it to them. It's all about how the threat actor operates and what their preferences are.
Well, yeah, no, if it's a spray and pray attack, then yeah, ultimately you don't care who to compromise. So once you get a foot in the door, you do whatever you need to do. But if it's like a targeted attack, I guess, yeah, the rules of the game do change a little bit.
Levels of sophistication, yes.
Yeah. All right. Alex, do you have anything on this topic before we continue?
Yeah, I don't want to linger on the topic too long. I'm just wondering how those phishing kits actually work with like hardware keys, right? So I understand how it works with like, Google Authenticator apps and, God forbid anyone's using SMS as 2FA, but those ones are pretty clear to me. It's less obvious to me what you do with like a YubiKey in a phishing scenario, because you first need to get them, do the phishable stuff, put in your login credentials. Most of them will just use their 1Password. They might not even notice that their 1Password is not automatically, or their password manager, so to speak, was not automatically filling the form. So that should be red flag number one, right? That it's a different site. But then, actually capturing the hardware token and then still actually leveraging it to get a token. I'm just curious, like, how have you seen them actually exploit that?
No, actually, that's a great call out. Typically, when you are dealing with a hardware-based authentication or certification security measure or step, it's usually that's where the kill chain stops. So most of the phishing kits exploit the human weakness, they exploit the software vulnerability of the back and forth authentication. But when part of the security posture is the validation of the device from a hardware level, that is not typically something we see stripped. The only time in recent memory that I actually have seen it is when the certificate or the authentication mechanism is a software-based file loaded on the user's computer, and that has been stripped off and then reproduced on another computer, because then they can replay that to make it look like they are coming from an authenticated device. Again, levels of sophistication. If you're talking purely the academic exercise of phishing someone to get the MFA token and then it stops with a YubiKey, no, usually that is a very good way to control it. In Microsoft's world, it's also a conditional access control policy, or CAC policy. And again, if those are properly configured, they are highly resilient to these types of attacks.
Yeah, good advice for everyone listening. Make sure you have hardware keys on anything important. I've been saying that to everyone for many years, and I think it's still great advice, although I'm sure attackers will figure something out one day, but for now, I think they're pretty good.
Well, the AI-assisted attackers might figure something out, and it's going to be beyond our realm of understanding of what's even happening.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Maybe sooner. All right. I guess, yeah, so we talked about the phishing stuff, but I kind of want to come back a little bit to exploitation and weaponization of vulnerabilities, and how kind of all of that happens. The accelerated timelines, and especially kind of like focusing on different types of attackers. What I mean by that is, like, we've spoken to a gentleman who's, for example, out of Israel, right, where the most of the attackers are financially driven, right, where the objective is to compromise the network, crypto lock everything, and then extort you for money, or say, hey, we're going to leak this if you don't pay us. There's a financial component to that. But do you feel like defenders should be doing something differently when the attackers are ideologically kind of oriented, where the objective is not to make money, is just to cause chaos and delete your data and just cause mayhem, as opposed to directly profit from it?
So let me try to answer this, but stop me if I'm not answering it the way of the question you're asking. The threat actor landscape is broken into a couple different categories. And the most recent kind of example you gave at the tail end of your question was what we call hacktivism, usually, right? An ideological motivated attack. You also, though, have nation state threat actors, right, where typically they're fulfilling an intelligence collection requirement of the host nation. They are operating for a country that is trying to steal, spy, or obtain information of an economic or military complex type motivation and outcome, right? I want to steal the next bomb, the next widget that goes in the next fighter jet from this country. So nation state threat group, go get me that data. It's an intelligence collection requirement of the host nation. So you have the hacktivists, you have the nation state, then you have organized crime. And many people are like, organized crime, isn't that like a modern day mafia? Conceptually, yes. It's financially motivated threat actor groups. Can you have a nation state that's financially motivated? Yes, we have a couple of those in this world, in this blue and green globe we call Earth. But usually they stay within their lanes, within their pillars. And organized crime groups are exactly, they're financially motivated. Now, look, they may use ransomware to do that. They may use a BEC to cause a wire transfer to go to the wrong invoice payment or to the wrong bank. They may decide to extort you for data they stole. What's the outcome, though, in all three scenarios? Financial. Then within this ecosystem of hacktivists, nation state, organized crime, you really actually have another part of the ecosystem we call initial access brokers. And IABs, or initial access brokers, their whole part of this ecosystem is to find the vulnerability, exploit the vulnerability to create a path into a victim, but not actually go further down the intrusion path. And we see this sometimes. We see where a threat actor gained access to a vulnerability. We see the evidence or the tool marks of the vulnerability being exploited. And then there's nothing for like a week. And then suddenly someone logs in, takes advantage of the downstream effect of the vulnerability, even if it's been patched, and because there was a backdoor placed, and they run with the rest of the intrusion path. That's a good example of an initial access broker. Someone got in, they put the door jamb in the door to the house, and they allowed someone else to walk through the door and steal and rob from the house. So these initial access brokers are part of this ecosystem of a criminality mindset. Because why? There's a financial motivation. If going back to your earlier point, if I can leverage AI and I can potentially find 1,000 vulnerabilities, I want to sell those. I can't possibly go and take advantage of 1,000 vulnerabilities as a person or even a team, but I can sell them to a whole lot of people. And that's the ecosystem we have in the dark web, right? Not to over sensationalize it, but it's the series of issues we have within these groups of threat actors. So does that answer your question kind of from the threat landscape perspective?
It provides a good overview, but I just want to kind of push back on the on what you said. If you're able to create, develop or exploit 1,000 vulnerabilities, and now you're selling them, but ultimately having butts in seats to actually go and actively exploit those things and actually collect the profits through, having basically the vertically integrated kind of attack chain. That part can be fully automated right now, right? And definitely in the future. So ultimately, do you think there's going to be kind of like vertically integrated groups where there's no point to sell anything because you can, why sell it for pennies on the dollar when you can just reap all the benefits, quote unquote, by doing the attack yourself in an automated fashion at scale with 1,000 parallel agents?
We may see that. We may see it sooner rather than later. I'm not seeing it at scale yet from the level blue, the cyber reason threat intelligence that we have, but we definitely see a lot of the same articles, a lot of the same academia type research papers, and the vendors that are saying this is coming. In reality, if the low-hanging fruit concepts and techniques and processes still work, threat actors or creatures of habit, and they will still they will gravitate to what they know because it works. When it stops working, that's when we will see a pivot.
I think there's another thing to say about, kind of to the thing you guys are discussing, which is if you can exploit it, doesn't mean you will, because I think going and actually doing the exploit and trying to reap the benefits, so to speak, also comes with risk, right? So it's like being initial access broker is way lower risk, from getting caught if you weren't the one that actually executed on it afterwards, right? So that would be the only counterpoint, I guess, to why wouldn't you just take the 1,000 and execute all of them? Because if you did, you're putting a target on your back as well. You could get caught. There's risks there, depending on who you are. I guess if you're a nation state, North Korea doesn't care about being caught. They just want to be successful, right? But other people might care about being caught.
Well, yeah, I guess, not everything that is stolen has immediate value to everyone. Like if you happen to get, I don't know, F-35 radar schematics, and you have it in your hand, it's like, okay, cool. That has some value to someone, but not a whole lot of people would know what to do with that particular set of schematics, as an example, right? So yeah, I guess that's something that you just sell access to. Yeah. Alrighty. I guess maybe coming back just to vulnerabilities and weaponization of these things. So as we did discuss that, the loop between finding an exploit and having it being exploited in the wild is shrinking, arguably month by month. Whether it's through human ingenuity, automation, fancier AI tools, models that you can run locally on your machine, on basically consumer grade hardware. There's been a lot of advancements where, before something that required, $100,000 GPU, now you can run it on a $10,000 GPU, which is within reach of most bad groups, so to speak. Right. Where do you see this kind of like ultimately going in the limit in the next little while? I'm talking about near future, and I'm talking about 10 years in the next year or so. And what should defenders, like, if they've learned nothing from anything that we've said so far, what should they be the most cognizant of in a world that is coming?
Great question. And I think as we start to wrap up here with the limited time I have left, I think that defenders, if they were to take anything away from today's show and our conversation, it should be that it's not about preventing the event or the incident. It's not about stopping the intrusion. You can make the castle walls 1,000 feet high. You're not going to keep every attack out. You're going to have a vulnerability. You're going to have a supply chain risk. You're going to have an insider threat. What we need to do better about as a security community is putting controls and processes in place to surface the anomalies to make us better at containing and preventing the blast radius of damage, right? Threat actor, if we come to terms that we're not keeping them out, sure, we'll keep out the majority, right? We have to. There's lots of noise, lots of garbage on the internet. Keep out the blast radius of noise, the bulk of the traffic. But if we accept and come to terms with as a C-suite, as boards of directors for organizations, we're going to have an incident. Now we need to train our people to understand and to recognize an event and an incident surface that anomalous information. Look, we should have our security operations centers saying, I got an odd call, the ticket needs to be routed for escalation versus just, I read the playbook and I moved on to the next call because I had to get the call done in 60 seconds to obtain a financial bonus. Like, we have to treat our people, teach our people that these are attackers, this is what they're after, and in the mundane of day-to-day life, when you see something, you need to have a way to surface it, and then we on the blue team side need to have a way to be able to contain it and consolidate it within the four corners of how the threat actor got in to prevent the broader issues of what we typically see: ransomware, large-scale business interruption events, large-scale data theft and extortion events. That's the piece I would leave you all with today.